On January 26, 1972, a commercial airplane broke apart in the sky over Europe. People on the ground heard an explosion, then silence, then debris raining down through winter clouds. There were 28 people on board Jet Flight 367. Within seconds, 27 were dead. One survived. Her name was Vesna Vulović. Vesna Vulović was born on January 3, 1950, in Belgrade, Yugoslavia, into a family shaped by post-war anxiety and quiet endurance, raised by parents who taught her to keep her head down and survive history rather than challenge it. And by her early 20s, she wanted something simple but dangerous in its own way: distance, which is why she applied to become a flight attendant for JAT Yugoslav Airlines, not for glamour, but for movement, for the feeling of lifting off and leaving the ground behind. And on the morning of January 26, 1972, she woke believing she was headed for just another workday, packed lightly, dressed in uniform, and spoke to her mother before leaving, her mother saying, "Don't forget to call when you land." Vesna answering casually, "I will, Mama," the kind of promise people make without thinking, because they expect time to continue. That morning, however, a crew scheduling error quietly altered her life, placing Vesna on Jet Flight 367 instead of another attendant with a similar name, a clerical mistake noticed only after assignments were finalized. And when Vesna hesitated at the desk, unsure if the change was correct, a supervisor waved it off and said, "It's fine, Vesna. We need you on this one." And she nodded, accepted it, and walked away without knowing she had just stepped into history. Flight 367 was a McDonnell Douglas DC-9, flying from Stockholm to Belgrade with a scheduled stop in Copenhagen, carrying 28 people, including crew. And when it departed Copenhagen at 3:15 p.m., the cabin felt unremarkable in the most dangerous way possible. Coats tucked under seats, overhead bins closed, engines humming evenly as winter sunlight spilled through the oval windows. A passenger smiling as Vesna poured coffee and saying, "Quiet flight today." Vesna replying, "So far." Another man leaning out into the aisle asking, "How long until Belgrade?" And Vesna answering with professional certainty, "Just a short while now," unaware that time was already running out. Beneath the floor, inside the luggage compartment, a bomb sat hidden among suitcases, placed there by Croatian nationalist extremists involved in a wider campaign of political violence against Yugoslav targets abroad, a campaign that had already produced hijackings, attacks, and threats across Europe. But none of that tension had reached the cabin. None of it had made it past airport security. And no one on board knew that the device had been checked in like any other bag, passed through inspections, loaded by hand, and armed long before takeoff. As the aircraft climbed steadily and leveled off at 33,330 feet, there was no turbulence, no raised voices, no sense of approaching disaster, only routine, the lie people trust most. Vesna moving once more down the aisle, steadying herself against a seatback, a passenger saying something trivial she would never remember, the engines maintaining their rhythm, the sky calm and indifferent. And then, at approximately 4:01 p.m., without warning, without a distress call, without time for fear to form, the bomb detonated, ripping open the belly of the aircraft in a single violent instant and tearing the plane apart in mid-air. When the bomb detonated at 33,330 feet, the aircraft didn't descend. It disintegrated, the sudden loss of pressure tearing the cabin apart faster than the human body could register fear. Passengers and debris expelled into open sky as if gravity itself had been switched on violently. And Vesna Vulović never screamed because she never had time to understand what was happening. Her body thrown backward into the rear section of the fuselage, a cylindrical fragment of metal that sheared away from the rest of the plane and began tumbling end over end through freezing air. And in that chaos, something accidental and cruel saved her. A metal service cart slammed into her, pinning her torso against the interior wall, breaking bones but preventing her from being ejected, sealing her inside a partial pressure pocket as the fuselage spun, slowed, and tore through the atmosphere rather than free-falling cleanly. Outside, pieces of the aircraft scattered across miles of countryside in northern Czechoslovakia, bodies falling separately, uncontrollably. But Vesna's section descended differently, clipping treetops, rotating, bleeding speed as it dropped toward a snow-covered mountainside near the village of Srbska Kamenice, where winter had packed the ground thick and soft. and when the fuselage finally struck, it did not stop instantly, but slid, carving through trees and snow, absorbing impact in increments instead of one fatal moment. A physics accident so improbable, doctors would later struggle to explain it without using the word miracle. Inside the wreckage, Vesna was alive, but destroyed. Her skull fractured, pelvis shattered, both legs broken, ribs snapped and driven into her lungs. Her spine damaged so severely that emergency responders later said survival alone defied medical expectation. And yet, she was breathing, faintly, shallowly, trapped in twisted metal and darkness, blood pooling beneath her as freezing air poured in through torn seams. The first person to reach her was Bruno Honka, a local villager and former World War II medic, who had heard the explosion and run toward the crash site expecting corpses, and instead heard a sound he did not expect: breathing. And when he found Vesna pinned inside the wreckage, her uniform soaked, her body crushed, he later said he recognized the signs immediately, kneeling beside her and telling her, "Don't move, you're alive, I'm here," while others gathered, stunned by the impossible sight of a living woman among the dead. Emergency crews arrived and extracted her carefully, her blood pressure collapsing, her body shutting down as shock set in, and she was transported to hospital, where doctors worked through the night, inducing a coma that would last 27 days, uncertain if she would ever wake, and if she did, certain she would never walk again, because the damage to her nervous system suggested permanent paralysis. And when Vesna finally regained consciousness weeks later, she remembered nothing. Not the explosion, not the fall, not the pain, only waking to faces telling her she had survived something no human being was ever meant to survive: a fall from the height of cruising aircraft altitude, a distance later officially recorded by Guinness World Records as the highest fall survived without a parachute. And yet survival was only the beginning, because living did not mean escaping consequence. It meant enduring what came next. When Vesna Vulovic survived the fall, the world decided she meant something, but she was never asked if she wanted that meaning. And when doctors finally allowed her family into the hospital room weeks later, her mother reportedly collapsed at the sight of her, not from relief, but from shock, because Vesna's body was wrapped in braces, traction, and scars. Her legs immobilized, her spine damaged, her future rewritten without consultation. And though she had no memory of the crash itself, no falling, no explosion, no fear, she was forced to live with its consequences every day afterward, undergoing years of rehabilitation to relearn basic movement, enduring constant pain, partial paralysis, and neurological damage that doctors had once said made survival alone impossible. Yugoslavia turned her into a symbol almost immediately, newspapers calling her a miracle, television crews filming her learning to walk again, the state celebrating her survival as resilience rather than asking what it cost her. And in 1985, Guinness World Records officially recognized her as the person who survived the highest fall without a parachute, a title she accepted politely but never embraced, later saying she felt uncomfortable being applauded for something she didn't choose and couldn't remember. Vesna returned to work for JAT, but never as a flight attendant again. She was reassigned to a desk job, grounded permanently, surrounded every day by airplanes she could no longer board, a quiet cruelty that followed her for decades. And although she attempted relationships and moments of normal life, the crash lingered, physically and psychologically, contributing to long periods of depression, isolation, and a sense that her life after 1972 belonged more to public curiosity than to herself. Politically, she did something unexpected. During the 1990s, as Yugoslavia fractured violently, Vesna openly criticized the government and participated in anti-war protests, a decision that cost her her job and state support, stripping away the institutional protection she had once been given as a national symbol, and leaving her financially strained, living modestly, quietly, far from the international attention that once surrounded her. Despite this, she remained kind in interviews, never dramatizing her survival, often deflecting praise by saying, "I wasn't lucky. I was unlucky to be there in the first place." A sentence that revealed more about her than any headline ever did, because survival did not feel like victory to her. It felt like continuation. In her later years, Vesna lived alone in Belgrade, her health declining, her injuries never fully healed, her name fading from public memory, until, on December 23, 2016, she was found dead in her apartment at the age of 66. The cause believed to be natural, her death reported quietly, almost anonymously, by the same world that once couldn't stop talking about her. And when news finally spread, it carried a strange symmetry. The woman who survived something impossible passed away without spectacle, without ceremony, without applause. Vesna Vulović did not save the world, did not choose her fate, did not ask to be remembered, and yet she remains a human contradiction that cannot be ignored. A woman who fell farther than anyone ever recorded, lived through it, and spent the rest of her life proving that survival itself can be heavier than death.